One of the bigger recurring themes on this channel has been examining the extent to which ponzinomics is really the lifeblood flowing through the veins of a lot of DeFi. Given that, I think we have to start asking, what's the most important non-Ponzi fueled part of DeFi? I think we probably have to say that it's staking. Okay, so maybe we're not directly financing anything with staking, but there's a yield, so it's probably close enough to be called DeFi under our broad crypto definitions. Luckily for us, no matter what anyone says, Cardano is objectively the king of liquid staking. And that liquid part probably turns out to really matter here. Ready? Let's go. Today, we're going to discuss Cardano's liquid staking and why it's really important, the speculation around the big November surprise, crypto and Howie being on a collision course, how we might turn Twitter into a great anti-propaganda tool for Cardano, and the US Fed news today. If your first reaction to this image was, hey man, your thumbnails, they don't make any sense. That liquid water barely even resembles a crown like a king would wear. Or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. It looks like the greater crypto landscape is all revved up again over an important new innovation. And this time it's liquid staking. A lot of posts kind of similar to this one coming out. This poster says, we investigated the state of liquid staking derivatives across 9 layer 1 networks in our latest newsletter. Check it out. And they have a nice infographic for us here. They're showing the amount of liquid staking going on in Cosmos, Near, Polkadot, Avalanche, Polygon, BSC, Solana, and Ethereum. And of course, they come to the conclusion that their cherished Ethereum is once again the king of this important new innovative metric in crypto liquid staking, with 7.3 billion in liquid staking. Of course, this is all wrong. This is all wrong. Ethereum is not the king of liquid staking, despite what this infographic would lead you to believe. But it is important. Measuring this is probably important. We'll get back to why this is all wrong. But first, we should talk about why this is important. Here's why this question about liquid staking is probably so important. Right now, crypto is like a person looking off out at the horizon. And way out there, it can see the silhouette of a person. And that person is a regulator, swinging this giant, cold, heavy hammer around, just like Thor in those Marvel movies, just waiting to launch through the air and use that hammer to crush something. And that regulator, that silhouette off in the distance, it's already obvious. It's beelining right toward crypto because it knows that DeFi is the perfect target for that big hammer. Here we have a great thread about the transcripts from the SEC versus library case, which have recently dropped. I won't bore you with all the little details here. You can go read this thread if you're interested in all the details. But here are the important parts. The judge sticks tightly to the Howey test. This is not a surprise at all. He also says the judge thinks Beanie Baby cells could be securities and wonders why the value of library isn't capped. So there's a whole bunch of additional details in here. They talk about some positive details for library versus the SEC. But they also say that the SEC makes it very clear that they have a view that even if you never market your token as being profitable, say you just remain completely silent about your token and any possible future value, it can still be a security just because people know you have an incentive and an ability to increase the value of that token. Here, Gabriel Shapiro thinks that, of course, is an absurd view, but he's a crypto guy like us, so we all think that's an absurd view. His guess, though, as this case, the judge will side with the SEC, mainly swayed by fear that mixed tokens create securities law loopholes. He says, I think this case has better pro-token facts than Ripple because of the clear, direct consumer utility of Library, and it will also probably be decided sooner than Ripple. This is looking pretty bad for crypto, pretty good for the regulators. So someone else had a really interesting take on this, and I think they described it correctly. Either crypto breaks Howey. Remember, the judge in that case stuck very rigidly to Howey. And this person says either crypto breaks Howey or Howey breaks crypto. I think this is probably right. We either have to have a decision, a legislative policy decision, or a judicial ruling, probably from the Supreme Court, that we need to revamp Howey. Howey and crypto don't really work together. They're on a collision course. One of those two has to yield or break the other one. I think we're going to need a big legislative policy change or a big judicial overruling of Howey or revamping of Howey. Here, this poster, he lays out how a court could trim some of the flab off Howey. What's happened, of course, is lower courts have come back in under Howey, and they've added a bunch of stuff. And some of that stuff revolves around this idea that an investment contract doesn't necessarily have to be some kind of binding relationship between the parties. It could be this sort of unilateral imposition of profit expectations. That's what Gabe Shapiro was talking about up here. He was talking about this idea that it can still be a security just because people know that you, the issuer of this token, have an incentive and an ability to increase its value. There's not like this binding relationship between you and the people who got their hands on the security. You never promised or even talked about, in this hypothetical he lays out, you never promised or even talked about increasing the value of the token, but he's saying the SEC is making it clear that they think it can be a security if the people who got their hands on that security just know that you have an incentive and the ability to increase its value. So, what does this have to do with liquid staking? Well, if this kind of fix doesn't happen, if either the courts or Congress don't come along and fix this collision course between Howey and crypto, if they don't fix Howey and this whole problem with unilateral imposition of profit expectations at a minimum, if they don't fix that at a minimum, but probably they have to revamp a lot more to make these two things compatible, then all of DeFi probably ends up under that regulatory hammer. Under this kind of interpretation, this rigid interpretation of Howey that we're seeing in the library transcript, if that ends up ruling the day, then all of DeFi could end up under the hammer of that regulator, of some regulator. And once DeFi ends up under that hammer, when people look around for yield in crypto, there's not going to be too many places left. Staking is going to be one of those places. And after they've already gone after DeFi, regulators are going to start looking at staking. They're going to say, hey, if you're one of these chains that doesn't have native liquid staking, that means there's depositing of those assets going on in order for the staking to happen. This is super common, as we've talked about many, many times on this channel, in sort of the EVM-oriented world, in the account balance world. They have a lot of blockchains have taken the path of slashing, which requires you actually deposit your stake with the stake pool. The problem with that is that once the regulators have already gone after DeFi, they're going to look at this situation and say, okay, wait a second, you're having people deposit money with you, and then you're giving them a yield. That sounds, even if they don't say that that's a problem with the securities laws under all the interpretations we just talked about, they're going to say that looks a lot like a banking relationship. We think that's banking, and none of you stake pools have any kind of banking licensure. They're going to come up with some category they think that falls into. Maybe it's banking, maybe it's something else, but they're going to require some kind of licensure. If you're making people deposit funds with you and you're giving them a yield, that's going to look a lot like the same kind of thing they were trying to go after with DeFi. Liquid staking is going to all of a sudden take on a whole new premium. native liquid staking, that is. This whole situation on these chains where you have to deposit your money with the stake pool and then you get this liquid staking derivative, that whole thing has immensely greater attack surfaces for regulators versus native staking. In native staking, native liquid staking, like we have in Cardano, we don't have to deposit our money with anybody. It's more akin to us voting in favor of that stake pool. There's no depositing of funds. It's a very different situation. If you look at the way our regulations are written, we have a huge amount of regulations that deal with people depositing money with other people and getting a yield. We have a whole body of regulations that deal with that scenario. But the situation where the staking just involves you sort of delegating your stake, it's more like you're voting for them. You're lending your confidence to that stake pool. You're putting your vote in with them as to who should be validating the blocks. It's not the same as this deposit situation. And I think if the regulators start looking closely at that, if they've already sort of figured out how they're going to deal with DeFi and they start looking closely at this situation, this is a much higher risk situation from a regulatory perspective. These kinds of blockchains and the stake pools that are actually taking deposit of their delegators' funds have a lot more to fear from the regulators. So that's why actual native liquid staking might become really, really important in the future. Why this poster? I guess it's supposed to be a media outlet of some type or someone disseminating news in some way. Here's why they got this very, very wrong. They said, we investigated the state of liquid staking derivatives across 9 layer 1 networks. They're looking at the wrong kind of staking. This liquid staking derivative type staking system. This is the wrong one. This is the one that, in my opinion, has the much greater regulatory attack surface. What they should have been looking at is what Daniel pointed out. Daniel and Cardano came along and said, hey there, fixed it for you. It's open source. Feel free to reuse at will. And of course, he made the correction that any of us would. He showed Cardano, not Ethereum, as the king of liquid staking, but Cardano as the king of liquid staking with 10 billion in liquid staking, easily outpacing Ethereum with 7.3 billion. And the most important thing here is, of course, this is actual native liquid staking, not the inferior liquid staking derivatives setup. They can frame that issue however they want to try to make Ethereum look good. But the truth is that Cardano is the king of liquid staking. Not only are we the biggest, but we actually did it right. We created native liquid staking. So we haven't talked a lot about the November mystery, the big November surprise. Here's a thread from Subcritical. He says, who knows what the November announcement is? And this poster came along and had an idea, an interesting idea. He said, people have been hinting at this paper. It's about to be peer reviewed at CCS 22. It was authored by 3 researchers from Edinburgh, ones you might recognize. He says, we also now have Scottfest. So maybe they have built the protocol described in the paper. Here's the paper. PEReDi, privacy enhanced, regulated, and distributed central bank digital currencies. I know you're thinking, you're like, whoa, CBDCs, those are the bad crypto, non-crypto tokens. We don't want anything to do with CBDCs. Maybe this is the best version of that we could possibly get. So obviously this is kind of an acronym. I think the P is for privacy. We've got enhanced, regulated, and distributed. So PEReDi, privacy enhanced, regulated, and distributed CBDCs. I think the important part here is the privacy enhanced part. Because I think what we fear with these CBDCs is something they identify right here. They say CBDCs aspire to offer a digital replacement for physical cash, and as such need to tackle 2 fundamental requirements that are in conflict. On the one hand, it is desired that they are private so that a financial panopticon is avoided. What does this word mean? Panopticon. This was originally the name for a theoretical type of prison that was designed so that a watchtower in the center of the prison could see into all the prisoners' cells. The prisoners' cells were kind of in this like cylinder around the watchtower, and the watchtower could look down into every single cell, but the prisoners couldn't necessarily see what was going on in the watchtower. So we worry about the same thing being created in a financial sense with CBDCs. Like the central bank would be like that watchtower, able to look into the financial goings on of every single person using the CBDC. So they're saying we want to tackle two fundamental requirements: that we not build this kind of financial panopticon on the one hand, and that these CBDCs should be regulation friendly in the sense of facilitating things like know your customer rules, anti-money laundering, and the combating of financing of terrorism. I know some of you are probably sitting there right now with your hound dog, angrily clutching the barrel of your 12 gauge, thinking to yourself, CBDC? My CBDCs are my gold bars buried behind my trailer. You can pry them from my cold dead hands. I understand where you're coming from. I know that perspective definitely has existed in crypto, but this may be the very best version of CBDCs we could ever get. Something like this that doesn't create that financial panopticon, that gives us some privacy, but still doesn't allow us to finance terrorism or engage in money laundering. This might be the very best version of a CBDC we could possibly hope for. As far as November speculation goes, we also still have this from back on September 25th, when Mojo, who you might know from the comments in this channel occasionally, posted this. What's happening here? And he was posting some kind of a tweet from BMW's official account. But by the time and I think a lot of people saw it, the tweet was already deleted. Luckily, it had been screenshotted. And it was the BMW account, the official blue check BMW account. Remember, this is in the pre-$8 blue check era. So BMW had responded to this post, and this post said this: breaking news, trusted source familiar to the matter whispered that BMW is contemplating using and investing into Cardano. Latest Q4, they will announce the decision to use a blockchain as proof of registration. And of course, the BMW response looked like this: sorry, not sorry, with a winky face. But if you ask me, what was the most mysterious response to Subcritical's question? It might have been this one right here. Even more mysterious, when I Google that word along with some predictable, possibly related additional keywords, I find this page at CardanoUpdates.com. And while it says no recent commits for this repo, what I find down here is you may also visit this link at GitHub. When I click on that link, I get this at GitHub 404. This is not the web page you were looking for. So seems like there might be two possibilities here. Either that was all a dead end and that Cardano updates page was just a page to satisfy some combination of search terms you might have queried there. And that's just kind of like some procedurally generated, holding page, for something that never actually existed, which linked me to a page for a repo at GitHub that never actually existed? Or is that an actual repo that exists that was set to private? I think you can tell which one of those two options I think is more probable. Midnight dApp. I think at this point, we all realize that Cardano has long been on the victim end of some kind of giant propaganda campaign from the larger crypto space. I think that's pretty apparent from all the misinformation that gets aimed directly at Cardano. But it looks like now we might have an interesting new tool to fight that propaganda. So this post surprised a lot of people, I think, today. This was a tweet from the White House. They said seniors are getting the biggest increase in their Social Security checks in 10 years through President Biden's leadership. And then down below here, this was added. Readers added context they thought people might want to know. And there was a little note down here explaining that actually in 1972, President Nixon had signed into law automatic benefit adjustments tied to the CPI. And this includes Social Security, which of course adds a little bit different context if you understand that perhaps this happened automatically by virtue of law signed into existence in 1972, then you might come up with some different attribution for this increase in Social Security. Elon posted below explaining what this was. He says, the community notes feature is awesome. Our goal is to make Twitter the most accurate source of information on earth without regard to political affiliation. And the funniest part was his post itself got one of these community notes. It says, readers added context if they thought people might want to know. The program is called Birdwatch. More information about the program and how to join can be found here. So if a bunch of Cardano people joined Birdwatch, I have no idea how it works or if this is even feasible, but if a bunch of people from Cardano joined Birdwatch, maybe we could go through and add community notes. When people say things like Cardano is a scam, Cardano doesn't have NFTs, whatever the latest flavor of misinformation is, and often it's like downright defamatory. It's I think in a lot of cases, a lot of the misinformation is pretty much libelous. So if we could somehow leverage this Birdwatch program to add community notes to some of those bits of misinformation, it might work like this. Apparently, the White House actually deleted this tweet after the community note got added. Finally, we heard from Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve today. The Fed approved a 75 basis point hike to take rates to the highest they've been since January 2008, a target range of 3.75 to 4%. There was tons of macro analysis on this today, so I won't go into all that. I'll let you look that up on your own. There's plenty of it available, but I will say two things. I watched the broadcast of the announcement along with the Q&A section. And I'll say two things. Jay Powell still looks remarkably like some kind of an owl person. I still refuse to believe that one of his at least great-grandparents wasn't an owl. I think we've got in his family tree some kind of a union between a human and an owl somewhere up in there. This dude looks like an owl. He's so capable at doing these announcements, though. It's amazing, and I very much admire the way he's able to take a question that wants him to take sort of a one of two binary positions on some, really hot button buzz term, and he's always very, very good at reframing that in a sensible way. I admire his ability to do this. It's probably some kind of an owl trait that's been passed down through the generations. He did say some interesting things during the Q&A. He said, the path to a soft landing has narrowed over the last year since inflation should have come down by now. And I'm paraphrasing. But the job market is very strong. They don't know if there's going to be a recession, and no one knows. But he did keep reinforcing that the inflation picture has become more and more challenging. And that's why he's saying that the path to a soft landing has narrowed over the last year. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.